Welcome. We are with Larry Sanger. He's the original founder of Wikipedia, but he's a very candid person. So, welcome to the show, Larry.
Thanks for having me back.
So, Larry, I have a new book. People write two kinds of books on artificial intelligence. One is very technical, how to do artificial intelligence for a technocrat. I'm not doing that. And the second is very fictional, science fiction and robots walking around and doing things and so on. So mine is not that either. Mine is a kind of a realist analysis of the social political implications of AI, of not only things like privacy, but collecting your habits, your data, and being able to predict what you are thinking, being able to influence what you are thinking. Fake news is a large part of that. And the whole idea of using machine learning to manipulate knowledge and manipulate people's psychology, people's agency. It's almost like people are giving up their agency. People are surrendering their agency, letting Google think for them. Because if Google knows everything, why do I need to have any knowledge? Why should I learn? Because whenever I need to know something, I can ask Google and it will tell me. Or I will ask Siri, it will tell me. So this whole post-knowledge kind of attitude, post-fact, actually, post-truth, you might say. So this is allowing the big data, the big digital corporations to kind of have more and more agency over the lives of people, and that's what this is about. So you as a person, a philosopher, and also somebody with a tremendous background as a pioneer in starting Wikipedia, I want to ask you views on this field. So if information, if what is considered truth is now becoming more a matter of what is popular, who gets more views, who gets more hits, and the Google algorithm search a particular thing. If you search your name or my name, what will come up is based on whatever the algorithms happens to write. And that may or may not be true. It may not even have been true. Their algorithms keep changing also. So the business of control by algorithm of what is knowledge, what is truth, is worrisome to me. And that is what my book is talking about. So I wanted to know your views on what I call the gamification of knowledge. So knowledge is becoming gamified in the sense that some players in Wikipedia have more points, if you will. They've made these successfully and nobody overturned them, so they are higher standing than the ones who made fewer edits or their edits were overturned. So you learn to be kind of accepted in the work you do. And people who are in the gamification of Wikipedia tell me you should first increase your rating by doing non-controversial, busy work. So if you make a large number of edits, which are non-controversial, factual things here and there, little nitpicking, the algorithm will keep scoring you positively because no one overruled it, either because it was factual or nobody cared. And then once you've gotten a huge amount of points, then you can start being courageous and taking stands which are controversial, and other people will not be able to overrule you. So it's a kind of...
That's right. That sounds right.
So this gamification of knowledge, replacing any kind of semblance of objectivity or any semblance of expert knowledge people. What are your thoughts about the direction we're going in? And AI is actually a force multiplier, making this happen very rapidly.
Wow, it's a very big topic. So I guess the first thing that I would say is I agree with what you're saying about how we tend to use the internet more and more as a prosthetic of our memory. And this is something that was already noticed over 10 years ago. People were talking about it. As everybody and his grandma started moving online between 2000 2005 or so, when like the majority of people in the cities basically were getting online, then right, then educators started making the argument, or at least progressive educators started making the argument that, knowledge is changing so fast and it's so easy to just look it up. And the thing that really matters is not like the facts that you have under your belt, but your ability to reason things through, your critical thinking ability. So this is a part of the gospel of progressive education theory, and it really does. This matters because it changes how a lot of young people in the United States, at least, are educated. Now, I think that there's a lot more memorization still going on in schools in the East, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
And in India and China. Now, I think that's not a bad thing. I think that rote memorization is not a good thing. But here in the West, again, insofar as this view of the progressive educators holds sway, we're going far too far in the opposite direction. And there's a chapter in my book, Individual Knowledge in the Internet Age. Is the name of the chapter. It's like number 7 or 8, I think. And I talk about this there. And basically, I say what we need to do is continue to develop our individual knowledge and not use the internet as a prosthetic. Because then, if we don't have a baseline amount of knowledge, then we're just using the, we're not going to know what questions to ask, because being able to ask an intelligent question itself is something that requires background knowledge. And you simply will not know you will not have a justified belief in an answer, because just believing something on the basis of some source which is presented as authoritative is not enough to actually have a justified belief. There's a big part of knowledge, in my opinion, involves situating the knowledge in, the belief in a coherent system. I'm not saying that's required and that's all that's necessary. I think there also needs to be a foundation of knowledge. But facts are not like, they don't just live by themselves. They actually have to be supported by a lot of other beliefs, which themselves have to be supported adequately one way or another. So all of this it's getting very philosophical, but it has a reason. So this philosophy actually has a practical impact on the world today, and it actually is related to what you're talking about. Basically, if we use the internet, if we use Google and just ask a question to Siri as a prosthesis, and we accept that, and we forget that it's necessary to develop whole systems of belief, basically, rationally, on the basis of good evidence, then we're going to be at the mercy of people who control us. We're losing our autonomy. By losing our intellectual autonomy, we're losing our personal autonomy.
Yes. So I call this, in my book, I have a chapter called The Battle for Agency.
Yeah.
Because I believe that as machines are getting smarter and people are getting dumber. The machine's getting smarter, everybody likes and everybody's happy. And I say, okay, as you go on autopilot,
Listen, if you're talking about weak AI, you're not talking about machines. If you're talking about weak AI, as opposed to strong AI, if you're just talking about algorithms and machine learning and very, very complex algorithms, like Google has, for example, then you're still being controlled insofar as you're being controlled. You're being controlled by other human beings.
That is correct.
Mediated by the weak AI.
Absolutely. Yeah. So there's a pyramid with a few, I call them elites. and these are the billionaires, trillionaires, whatever. They define the rules of the game, and this AI is a force multiplier. This AI in the middle is a force multiplier, and they hide behind this thing. If I complain to one of these guys, they will say, "Hey, my algorithm did it, and the reason your post didn't get promoted or it got canceled or whatever, I don't know. I just work here. My algorithm did it," as if this algorithm is some kind of a god. So this deification of the algorithm, which is going on, and this machines getting smarter, and people getting dumber because people are abrogating their authority and their agency, and people are running on autopilot. Now, it's very, very sad. I question people at different age levels, and our age level, I found that maybe 10% were happy to say, okay, let the system make decisions for me. It can decide what grocery I need to buy, and maybe the robot can come and fill my refrigerator, and maybe Netflix will tell me what movie to watch. Maybe they'll tell me which restaurant to go to, what to order. So I don't mind. 10 or 20%. When you go younger, it goes up a little bit. But when you go to people who are below 20, it's like 50 to 80% have the attitude, we don't care. We don't think there's anything wrong. If the machine can make those decisions, why should I have to make decisions? If the system can tell me, who I should date, who I should marry, what job is good for me, because the day is coming where I don't even need to put out my resume. It already knows enough about me. And at the other end is another HR department, which is also an algorithm figuring it out. So my algorithm just putting out my stuff, and the other algorithm deciding whether to hire me, I don't even have to do a whole lot. So there's a loss of selfhood. There's a loss of being human. There's a spiritual consequence of what I'm saying, and I give it the name. I've coined the name moronization. The moronization of the masses, which means the masses are morons, and the more you can moronize them, the more control you have over them, the more you can decide what they'll buy. That power to influence what they'll buy, you can sell it to the corporate people who want to do advertising. And so the future of becoming trillionaires is to use these AI machines and moronize the masses on a very large scale, and then take these moronized masses as a kind of a base of influence and power you have, and market it to people who want to sell them goods. So this is actually a very horribly serious thesis that I concluded with. Yeah. And I need your opinion on what do you think of this, because this is not good news.
I think you're certainly onto something here. I mean, people certainly are demoralized by the experience that they have on like Facebook and Twitter. There been any number of, I haven't like kept up with the specific research, but I know that it exists, and that establishes that it's a real phenomenon, that the way that people interact via social media is not nearly as genuine as even what we're doing is better, of course, than just like typing texts back and forth or whatever, and liking and retweeting or whatever. Yes, and it is demoralizing for sure. And I think your thesis is that being demoralized, that makes people easier to control, essentially. They become hooked on basically the rewards.
It's a management system.
Yeah.
Actually, some of the technical conferences, AI conferences, and these coaches who go and teach how to get your customer hooked, they use the terminology of addiction. And they say that you first get him to respond, then you realize your machine algorithm figures out where he responds, what his hot buttons are, where his vulnerabilities are, and then you keep repeating it. And when the person gets into a habit, and then eventually the habit turns into addiction, and then he'll have a withdrawal symptom, you can punish him by not giving him that. So basically, you've got him controlled when you have him addicted. This is a psychological drug, if you will. And so I think there are some profound metaphysical and theological consequences.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, it isn't that the establishment is able to successfully indoctrinate most of humanity via the gamification of social media and the media generally, like by promoting, say, establishment news sources on YouTube, for example. I don't think it really, people don't interact with social media and the internet generally so much in that way. They find their niche, they find their the silo that they're comfortable in, and they stick to it. So I'm what might be called a conservatarian, sort of. I've called myself a libertarian for a long time, but I've become a little more conservative over the years. There's large swaths of Twitter that I never see because it's far outside of my silo, so I think what I'm saying is that you have to sort of decouple the games that people use to addict people to a service, right? And using a system on the one hand, from the ability to manipulate people to think good thoughts and feel a certain way about certain views. In other words, the gamification, it could be to a certain extent used to promote a message. And I think they're really pulling out all the stops they can to make that happen. But what I'm saying is that it's hard for them to do that because they're fighting against their own systems, which create these silos. You see what I'm saying?
But when you look at the Cambridge Analytics, the different companies that were hired by Russians and now by Chinese, and Chinese don't need to hire a British company on big data. They got their own, because they got their own huge amount of big data on the United States. Remember, with facial recognition, every video camera, including this one on Zoom, is able to tell who is talking to whom and what they are saying. And with natural language processing, with the speech recognition, all of this can be transcribed into words. And then natural language processing can understand the semantics and the meaning and the context and what we're talking about. It's becoming so sophisticated that now, now they don't need the old-fashioned eavesdropping, the old-fashioned wiretapping, because your whole digital network is a kind of a giant wiretrap on everybody, in a sense, only restricted by what the law says you're not allowed to do. But so first of all, this deep listening and cognitive intelligence to figure out what is going on, where is the pulse, what's the market, is the market moving this way, that way. I mean, that's enormous amount of intelligence that can be used for all kind of purposes, political, financial, etc. But then also the ability to use natural language processing and write. There are AI software that can actually write a nice article, and there are articles that are written by AI that because people cannot tell the difference that this is by a machine or by a human being. And there are these experiments where they have competing AI systems produce automatically an article on today's news or on what happened on this topic or something, and then they show it to a panel of human beings to see how many of them can recognize which one is a machine and which one is a human author. And the machines are getting better and better. So, what I'm saying is that the ability to
passing the Turing test.
passing the Turing test. So now the ability to figure out what you want to hear as a person. Firstly, decoding your mind, hacking into your mind and decoding your mind, and figuring out, okay, Larry would like to hear that. Okay. And we've tested it out. Whenever we say that, the chance that he'll hit it, like it, and all that is higher. So
Yeah.
once we figured you out, and in certain contexts, maybe by the day of the week or by how you're feeling in the evenings, mornings, whatever the situation is, they really figured you out. And they figured you out better than a companion, maybe even better than you know yourself, because there is a shadow side of yourself that you don't want to know, but the machine wants to know everything about you. And so having figured you out in so much detail gives it a power, just like a friend or a companion who knows too much about you has some power over you. So this kind of a system having power over you, then being able to produce the things to manipulate you. So I think that the manipulativeness is a very real threat.
I see what you're saying. No, you're right about that. My earlier comments are really just talking about, a technology that's 5 or 10 years old. But if you're talking about future developments in AI, I mean, right now, I know what you're talking about. I mean, I've seen some of this evidence of advanced AI, and it's scary what is possible to do. It's resembling at least more and more strong AI. I mean, like
Yes.
At least the output of these well-trained systems. It's really amazing. I wonder how many of the accounts that I interact with on a daily basis on Twitter are actually are bots. I hope it's not too many. That would be demoralizing for sure. But I have a feeling that I have interacted with some. I just don't know, and there might not be any easy way to know which ones they were. Just distinguishing them from people who just never built up very many followers or whatever.
So as the ability of an AI system or a bot or something to replicate real human behavior improves so much that most of the time most people would not know the difference, then you could also say that at that point in time there's an inflection point where being human is kind of downplayed, devalued. The value of being human is lost. So first
I would think that it would be quite the opposite. It's like when that gets to be a problem, the number of followers that you have, for example, if you know that like 20% of them on Twitter are bots, then the number of followers that you have is no longer going to matter. And after all, people will be able to like create bots to order and just artificially inflate their account. And then there will be a new requirement for social media systems, like guarantees that the people you're interacting with are human beings. Like, how do you do that? Well, then there's going to have to be, biological based identity systems, which is scary in itself. But yeah, that's going to end up having to be a requirement of these systems. I mean, if it's trivial for people to make accounts that are just bots, then nobody's going to want to get onto a social network where there's a good chance a lot of the supposed people you're interacting with, the accounts you're interacting with, are just machines. I mean, even if the experience is similar to human beings, that's different. Yeah,
but
I don't know.
Suppose, Larry, and Apple and Google and all these guys are soon going to come out with their augmented reality systems. So if you're wearing this augmented reality, you can have the experience that You don't need to physically go to Niagara Falls, and you don't need to go to a certain jungle, and you don't need to put your head inside you don't need to put your hand inside the mouth of a tiger to get that experience, because you're going to get it virtually.
Yeah.
And you're going to feel the tactile, you're going to feel the smell, and the cool air, and it's all of that. It's not just visual, it's not just hearing and visual, it's also tactile. It's also because you are having these variables. You're having these variables that give you sensory experience. So as the AR becomes more realistic, it affects things like the future of Disney, the future of tourism, the future of fantasy. So as fake worlds become more popular with the generation that don't think that being, whether it's real or not, who cares? I'm having that experience. So what they're looking for is experience of pleasure rather than whether or not it's authentic. So inauthentic pleasure is just as good, because that's how that's a new kind of a new age. There's nothing wrong with that from their point of view. That's what I'm calling dehumanizing, in the sense that the value of a real human being is a conscious being versus an unconscious machine that can mimic the behavior of a human being and give you the same service. Could be medical service, could be a barber shop, could be a massage guy, could be could be anything, could be a tour guide. Maybe the tour guide is not a real person. So as more and more functions, including emotion, including the band that's playing in your favorite bar, and if a whole lot of emotional functions, including companions. In Japan they have a toy, a robot that men carry to their offices. It's a female that sits on their desk and gives them advice. It's you're talking too much, or this guy, you're being too rude, and I think you cannot trust this other fellow on the phone, and it's sort of giving you this kind of advice, and it's learning from your reactions and which advice you took. It's kind of like Siri with a persona sitting there.
Right. Sure.
And so people are, it's a seller, it's selling there. So if the future is dehumanized, gadgets and voices and dehumanized intelligence, then it does downgrade the value of being human, the importance of human being. And then maybe you do not need such a big population.
Yeah.
Why would
I believe I follow you, and right. I haven't. Well, a lot of us have been thinking about this lately. That the more we learn about the capabilities of AI and of ever richer, machine brain interfaces and augmented reality and artificial reality. It really does make like the unmediated experience of reality something worth talking about. I tend to think that that you are right. An authentic human connection has a value that a connection with the machine is really dependent upon. The machine is trying to imitate a real human connection, and there's something quite pathetic actually about living in a world that's made up by machines. It's the same reason that like a teenage boy is being pathetic, spending hours and hours in a virtual world playing some video game, when he really ought to be making something with his life. That's our reaction, and why isn't developing points in a virtual world making something with your life? Well, you are in the virtual world, they might say, but no, there's a reason why we think those sorts of virtual rewards are not valuable. And to bring it back a little bit closer to the present day capabilities, if there were indeed, as I was saying, a lot of bots and I discovered that, like, you know, half of my followers were actually bots, and half of the likes that I receive on some tweet are artificial, then the whole thing would become like a sham. Like, it would probably take less than half to convince me to just abandon it entirely. So I just hope that other people are going to have the same reaction that I have, and I suspect it sounds to me like you have, to this sort of thing. That I mean, my view is that life is the standard of value, that and that human life, at least as far as we know, without any further religious inspiration, divine inspiration of one sort or another, human life is the highest, most important life form that we know of, and that we have to keep that in mind when we evaluate new technologies, right? If we're neglecting other people while we pursue relationships with computers, that's a really bad thing. I mean, that's a tragedy.
So I think we have a good lot of common points that we agree on, and a lot of food for thought that we need to continue this conversation someday. And I want to thank you for your excellent comments and good insights and good feedback. My book is out. Create a huge storm, because I'm taking on lots of powerful people, powerful organizations, and I'm not holding back my analysis on what they're up to, what the implications are, ethical implications. There are ethical implications. And I think that the kind of disruptions that we're going to have are something that most people are not expecting and most people are not prepared for. So we'll keep in touch, and I'd love to continue having your comments on this.
Well, likewise, I wouldn't mind coming back on your show. It's been a lot of fun.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
thank you.
Likewise. And thank you, Larry. Wonderful to talk to you. Thank you.
You too.
Namaste to all of your followers.